Worshippers of Pumpkin Hitler like to claim that not one court has looked at the evidence of voter fraud. This is obviously false to anyone still in touch with reality. The facts can easily be checked by anyone who is really interested in knowing the truth. State and federal judges, many of whom were appointed by Trump, dismissed more than 50 lawsuits alleging voter fraud and challenging the results of the election. Some of the attorneys involved in those cases are now facing disbarment and possible criminal charges for participating in the fraud. In none of the cases were they able to present any actual evidence of voter fraud in numbers large enough to affect the outcome of the election. Everyone from the former guy himself to Mr. Pillow has been claiming to have evidence of massive voter fraud, yet none so far have been able to produce any. I wonder why that could be. While we're on the subject, I wonder why Republicans aren't concerned about election integrity in states that Trump won. Another thing I wonder about: most of the Republicans who are challenging the results of the 2020 election were also on the same ballot. So if the election results were fraudulent, that means that they weren't legitimately elected either. If they really wanted to demonstrate that they believed there was voter fraud, they could do so by resigning, yet they remain in office. Maybe we should also investigate how they were re-elected. Instead of producing evidence that he lost, their orange leader incited an insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. And none of those re-elected Republicans want to investigate it. They want us to move on from the election, but they're not willing to move on from their claims of election fraud, and instead continue to perpetuate the big lie because the snowflakes can't accept the fact that they backed a loser. Cheeto Jesus lost in the White House, the Senate, the House of Representatives, and a lot of local positions. And as long as they continue to back this loser, they will keep losing free and fair elections. That's why they're so desperate to pass obstructive voting laws. They know that if they don't suppress the vote, they'll continue to lose. So the only way they can win is to continue to obstruct the voters. Even Orange Julius Caesar's own cronies at first tried to inject some reality into the situation. In November of 2020, the former guy's own Attorney General, William Barr, said, "To date, we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in this election." Trumpists now claim that Barr was lying when he said this. Yet at the same time, they believed him when he said that the Mueller report found no evidence of a Trump conspiracy with Russia, in spite of the fact that Mueller himself said otherwise. Republican cancel culture is so severe that they even tried to cancel sitting Vice President Mike Pence by hanging him when he refused to overturn the election results. The real cancel culture obviously comes from the right. Anyone who dares to go against the GOP's false narrative immediately becomes the enemy. Mike Pence, William Barr, Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, and a host of others who dared to speak the truth have already been canceled by the GOP fascists. An amusing side effect of all the lies and slander involved in this alleged voter fraud is that many of the states Trump lost were formerly red states. That means that in those states, Republicans were in charge of running the elections and counting the votes. So their own party is now accusing them of fraud and incompetence. Many Republican voting officials are now receiving death threats because of these accusations. These Republican election officials are tired of being accused of fraud and incompetence and are now suing members of their own party for making these false allegations against them. In other words, the GOP is now devouring itself from the inside out. Their house of cards is collapsing. One of the fun things about watching the former guy's attorneys led by Giuliani try to prove voter fraud was the fact that they made plenty of claims to the news media, but when the time came to present the actual evidence in court, they had nothing. Unless, of course, you count Bimbo Barbie's testimony. Giuliani's star witness, Melissa Carone, was so over the top that Giuliani became a laughingstock for having her testify in the first place. Her antics were so far removed from reality that even Giuliani tried to silence her several times during the testimony. Now Giuliani is under investigation and could very well lose his law license, as are several other of Agent Orange's hired guns. With his Stop the Steal scam, the former guy managed to raise more than $175 million during November and December of 2020 alone. Allegedly, the money donated was to fund efforts to challenge the election results, but in reality only $10 million was actually spent on legal costs. This means that if you donated $1 to Stop the Steal, 5 cents of it went to the purpose for which it was actually intended. The rest went into Mango Mussolini's pocket. It even says so in the fine print on his website. But the gullible keep on giving. Not only that, but millions of donors were duped into believing they were making one-time donations when they were actually billed again on a monthly basis, until this particular fraud was discovered and stopped. So Stop the Steal was really just one more way to fleece the flock. So what does real voter fraud look like? Voter fraud is voter suppression. Voter fraud is voter intimidation. Voter fraud is gerrymandering. Voter fraud is moving mailboxes off the street so people can't vote. Voter fraud is lying about voter fraud and then trying to blame the other party for your own failure to run an electable candidate. The real voter fraud is being committed by the Republican Party. Voter fraud didn't increase in 2020. Voter turnout did. That's what really scares Republicans to death. But instead of modifying their policies and finding better candidates to run, they continue to try to suppress the vote and perpetuate the big lie because they know they can't win a free and a fair election. The bottom line is that the Dayglow dotard lost the election by over 7 million votes. If the Trumpists are claiming that there was voter fraud in numbers significant enough to tilt the election in their favor, then the burden of proof is on them to demonstrate this. Actual evidence of such voter fraud must be submitted to the courts who decide such cases. As of now, they're 1 in 50 on trying to claim voter fraud. That's because courts require actual evidence and not QAnon conspiracy theories, YouTube videos, or alt-right news media opinion pieces. Until they can produce actual evidence of 7 million fraudulent votes, the election stands. As of the date of this video, we're 10 months past the election, and they have consistently failed to do so. They will continue to fail because voter fraud in such numbers simply does not exist. Carrot Caligula lost. Dry your tears, get over it, and get back to your safe space, snowflakes.